Pull yourself together. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Knitting Pickle podcast. Can't quite believe I'm saying that. My name is Laura. I live in Warwickshire in the UK, which is smack bang in the middle of England. I live in a little village in the countryside with my husband and my 2 children. I'm currently a stay-at-home mum and have been for the past few years, which has meant I've had lots of spare time to develop my passion for knitting. I started knitting when I found out I was pregnant with my second child. I don't know why. I think going into my second pregnancy, I knew that I'd need something to keep me busy and focused and something to kind of keep my hands busy. So I just thought, okay, let's give knitting a go. And here we are now. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed. I'm a little bit taken aback by the reception that episode 1 got. It was so last minute and ad hoc, and this time round I feel even more nervous because I know there are people watching. But hopefully I'll be able to chill out a little bit. I keep trying to remind myself to slow down and take my time and not rush, so hopefully this one will be a little bit more planned. I've got some notes, though they're currently on the other side of the room, so that's a great start. But I think because I've written everything down, it's locked in my head, so hopefully we're all good. Calm down. Let's start with what I'm wearing. Today I am wearing my Novice Sweater by Petite Knit, and this is, I think, the first kind of full garment I ever knit for myself. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew nothing about mohair. I'd never done a top down. No, I had done a top down, but it was a raglan. It wasn't like a circular yoke like this is. And I'd originally bought the mohair for a different pattern, and I didn't know that there was such a thing as dye lots. So I started making this, and I had, I think, 5 balls of this pink mohair, which is the Kid Silk Haze by Rowan in the shade Shadow. And I'd knit all of the body, and I went to start the sleeves, so I thought, oh, I need to buy some more mohair. So I ordered some online, and it came, and I was like, this is the wrong one, I've ordered the wrong colour. So I took it back to where I bought it from. I live super close to Wool Warehouse. I know, right? Literally, it's round the corner. So at the time they had like a shop front that you could go to. It's closed at the moment, but so I went over to Wool Warehouse and was like, can we compare? And they went back to the warehouse and they compared it. They were so helpful, and I realised it was the right shade, just a different dye lot. So this went straight in the naughty corner and was there for about a year. I felt like really silly and annoyed, and like I spent all this time and now the arms aren't going to match, so I just put it away. And then at the beginning of this year, in January, I decided it was time to start kind of going through my pile of rejected projects and stash, and I picked this out and I thought, do you know what, so what, the yarns are a slightly different colour, that doesn't really matter. So at the join, I tried to blend the 2 colours together a little bit. I don't even know if you can tell. I've stopped seeing it now. I don't see that the arms are a different colour to the body, and I think when you're wearing it, it's a lot less obvious than when it's laying flat. But you might be able to see here kind of the darker pink and then into a lighter pink. So what I ended up with is this kind of ombre sleeve effect, and when I was working on it back in January, I was posting about it on my Instagram, and everyone said they thought it looked great. So I was like, okay, well, fair enough, let's crack on with it. And I'm so glad I did. It's one of my favourite things to wear. It's so fluffy and comfy, and I'm so proud of it because of what it went through to come into existence. I like that it's not perfect now. I like that it's different to every other Novice sweater out there because the sleeves are a different colour. I think it gives it charm and character, and I love it for that. I probably don't need to tell you much about Petite Knit patterns because most people have given one a go. Really well written pattern. The fit of this one is it's quite loose. I'm pretty sure I didn't hit gauge because back then I didn't even do things like gauge swatching or anything like that. So I have no idea if this is a true representation of the Novice Sweater or not. But I like it. The one thing I would change about this is that at the time my bind offs were really tight, so like there's literally no stretch in my bind off. I can put it on, but it's a bit tight on the bind offs on the sleeves as well. But again, it adds to the charm and I can still wear it. So that's what I'm wearing today. Moving on to finished objects. I've got quite a few this week, but I won't dwell on all of them for too long because some of them are ones that were in episode 1 and they were nearly finished, so they're not really that different. I'll start with, whilst we're talking about petite knit, I guess we should probably talk about this one. This is the Friday Slipover by Petite Knit, and I used Filcolana Arvetta in Grey Marl, held together with Alsterman Kid Silk in Silver, and I absolutely love the texture that it's creating, and I spoke about this last week, so I won't go into any more detail with that. I think my son is trying to get into the bedroom. Sorry about that. Sorry if the shot's slightly different. My son is at home this week. My daughter's having her nap. And my husband is currently painting the ceiling in the kitchen. So my son obviously wanted to come and see what I was up to. So yeah, I'm not going to dwell too much on this because I talked about it a lot last week. But now it's finished, I do have some notes on it. I really like this and I've been wearing it a lot. I found I've been throwing it on rather than a jumper quite often, and I really like it over dresses, but the fit isn't what I imagined, and that is fully my fault, not the pattern's fault. Not only did I not gauge swatch, but I also did it in a different knitting style to usual, so my gauge was very different, and it's definitely ended up quite wide and a bit short. It was another one of those, I'd ripped it back, I'd stopped and started on it so much, I was just desperate for it to be over, so I cast off too soon in impatience, and that's something that I do too often, and I'm trying not to do much anymore. So it's definitely a little bit wide on me and a little bit short, so I don't feel like it's a true representation of this pattern. I love the construction of this, and I think I probably will knit it again when the time is right, but I'll knit it English style. So I can, and maybe a size down as well. I tend to size up. I don't really know why. I think it's because my bottom half is quite a bit wider than my top half. So when something is done with a chest measurement, it like maybe right around my chest, but quite often it can be too tight on my hips. So I tend to size up a little bit. And sometimes that's fine, sometimes it's not. Maybe I should do some shaping in the future, I don't know. Follow the size for the size that fits my top half, but then increase for the bottom. I don't really know. But that is the Friday pullover. I will put in some footage of me wearing it, probably over a dress, as that's how I've been wearing it the most. I think it looks like really spring, quite chic, quite fashionable. And I think the cut of the garment I've ended up with looks better over dresses than it does with trousers. So that's FO, finished object, number 1. Number 2, let's go on to this one, seeing as again this is one that was featured quite heavily in my last episode and it was nearly finished, so I don't really need to go into too much detail with this. This is the Calendula sweater by my friend Sandra. I'm not going to try and pronounce her knitting name because I don't even know where to start and I wouldn't want to say it wrong, so of course I'll put it on the screen below. But this is a pattern I've knit quite a few times before. I tested it for her about a year ago and I absolutely love it. I can't tell you what the yarn is because it was something that was donated to me by my mum, but it is, I know that it's 50% acrylic, 50% wool, so it's washed really, really well. There's no pilling so far. My son hasn't worn it too much because it's been very warm, but it's kind of my go-to for putting on him in the morning because he doesn't like to wear a dressing gown and it can get a little bit cold in this house in the morning at the moment. So this is what he usually chucks on in the morning. It's oversized, it looks super cute on him. The rolled hem kind of gives it a little bit of a fisherman vibe. I'll try and get some footage of him wearing it, but he tends not to want to wear things unless he chooses to. He's one of those kids. So yeah, that's my finished Calendula. Not much to say about it. If you want to know more about this, then go and have a little peek at episode 1. Shameless plug. Oh, I need to calm down a little bit. I'm getting quite flustered this week. So my next finished item is something that was completely unplanned and something I've become absolutely obsessed with. And it's all started with this little hat. This was meant to be a hat for me, a beret. This is the I don't know if it's Bisbis or BB, it's probably BB Beret. And you know what? That's the one thing I didn't write down in my notes. I didn't write down the designer. Please forgive me. I will put it below, obviously. This is the BB Beret, and I originally was going to make this for myself. But as I started to knit up the fabric, I quickly realised that it wasn't something that I was going to wear. I don't think the colour would suit my hair colour, and it just kind of, it seemed a little bit childish, if anything, the fabric that I've created. This is one strand of Filcolana Mercy in natural white and one strand of some hand-dyed mohair that I bought on Etsy from In the Crochet Corner, and the shade is called Carnival. It's not available anymore, I don't think, but do check out her Etsy shop because there's just so many stunning hand-dyed yarns in loads of different bases, and the yarn, that mohair itself is what really inspired this. I bought it completely on a random whim. It popped up in my feed somewhere, I think, and I was like, wow, I love that. I'm just going to buy it and see what happens. So as I was making this hat, I probably got to about here and realised that it wasn't going to be for me. But instead of ripping back, I love the fabric so much, I didn't want to just rip it all back. I thought, I'll see if I can make this fit my daughter, because it's an adult's pattern. So what I did was I took the measurement from the centre to where the decreases start in the pattern and applied that to my head, and realised it went from the top of my crown to the top of my ears. So I then measured my daughter's head from the top of her crown to the top of her ears, and carried on following the pattern until I reached that circumference. And then you start decreasing, to which I made this section shorter than in the original pattern. It's obviously smaller head, but surprisingly not that much smaller than my head. Strange. And then you finish it with an I-cord bind off, which I'm obsessed with, and you'll see a little bit more of that in a while. And it's just made the most adorable little hat. Even the little I-cord guy at the top, it just looks so perfect, and it's one of those things where it looks like something you'd buy in a shop, and I'm so proud of it. Unfortunately, my daughter does not like wearing hats. She just doesn't. She hates it. I can sometimes get it onto her if she's distracted by something else for a little while, but then she will quickly whip it off. If I manage to get some footage of her in it, I will put it in. But after I finished this, I was looking at the fabric and I was like, this just needs to be a cardigan. It has to be a cardigan. It'll be perfect. And that's how we got to this guy. This cardigan is a self-draft. I basically made it up as I went along, but I kind of knew what I had in mind whilst I was making it. I wanted a summer cardigan for my daughter, so I wanted something with a wide neck so as not to make her too warm. I also thought she hasn't worn mohair before. I don't know how she's going to react to it, so I didn't want anything too close to her actual skin up here. I was going to do, well, I did do a balloon sleeve with the I-cord bind off to match the brim of the hat, and I definitely did this a little bit too small, so I had to stretch it when I was blocking it, but she can just about get her hands in and out of it. And I wanted just a small closure at the top, because the idea is that it will be thrown on over some dresses and things, so I didn't think it needed buttons all the way down. Also, I hate doing buttons and I tend to only do the top ones up anyway for her. And the very special thing about this cardigan is that it was my first experience of steeking. Again, completely unplanned. Steeking was something that I wanted to do for quite a while, and you know, if you don't know anything about steeking, it's when you literally cut your knitwork is where you cut your knitwear in half, pick up the stitches and then apply your button band. So when I knit this, I knit it in the round, all in stockinette stitch. And the reason you do that instead of knitting it back and forth is that I am not the biggest fan of purling. Usually steeked items are colour work items because it's much easier to do colour work in the round than it is flat. But in this case, I just don't like purling, so I knit it in the round as a jumper. The only thing that I didn't do in the round was I did the neckline first in like the kind of picot style, which is where you knit a few rows and then you do a row of yarn overs and knit two together, carry on knitting and fold it over, and that creates this lovely little bumpy edge. I did that and then I joined in the round because steeking this folded bit I don't think works. And it's the same at the bottom. I did, just like I did on the sleeve of my ranunculus, I did a folded over hem. So I didn't do that in the round either. I cast off my steek stitches and then carried on. I did 7 steek stitches for this, which was far too many because I just had loads of fabric left over after I cut it. I reinforced it using the crochet method because I do have a sewing machine, but it's currently packed away somewhere and it needs a service. And so the row of stitches that you're about to cut, you crochet one leg of that stitch with the leg next to it, which secures all the knit work, and then when you cut it, it won't unravel. Because of the nature of knitting, your stitches won't actually unravel anyway, even if you don't secure it, but just to be safe, you tend to secure it in some way. So I did originally do the crochet, securing up the middle before I cut it. And then when I realised I had so much fabric left over, I just cut it away anyway. So I ended up with a non-enforced steek. So what I did was I picked up all the stitches for the button band, and then I knit my button band just like I do with my folded hems, knit in stockinette, then do a row of purl, carry on in stockinette, cast off, fold it over and sew it down. I also dropped the mohair for the inside because I just thought it looked quite nice. I didn't know if I'd have enough mohair to finish, so I thought I'd preserve some of it because you can't see it, so I might as well just have it white. But I actually really like the look of it, and that, my friends, is what is tickling my knitting pickle this week. Over the past 2 weeks, I've really connected with the inside of garments, and I get so much pleasure when the inside of a handmade garment is as beautiful as the outside of a knitted garment, and there'll be a little bit more on that later. But this is one of the examples where actually the inside is quite a bit nicer than the outside. My pickup wasn't the best, but the inside, I'd like to think if someone picked this up not knowing it was handmade, they wouldn't know it was handmade because the finish on the inside is just so beautiful. So I'm really, really proud of that. And so when I folded my button band over, I popped the steek inside, the steek stitches inside the button band, so it was then secured again. So it's not going anywhere. It's not going to unravel. It's not going to, you know, fall apart because it's secured in there by the button band itself. So I was quite proud of myself for that little trick. I hadn't seen it anywhere. It's probably a thing. I definitely didn't invent it. But I'm really, really pleased that I had a successful first steeking journey. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was thrilling, absolutely thrilling. Like, it feels so wrong, but it's like when you're just snipping through it, it's like, whoa, it's exciting. I've done afterthought heels before, and that is similar to steeking in that you cut your knitwear open. So if you want to give steeking a go, I would recommend doing an afterthought heel sock first, because it's kind of like a little, like a practice really, and you see that actually it does work. The fabric isn't meant to unravel when you cut it that way. Obviously if you cut it across, it would unravel, but cutting it up, it stays as it is because that's the nature of the fabric. So that's my daughter's little cardigan. I did get some footage of her wearing it when we were coming back from the nursery run this week. My son went back to nursery after the Easter holidays, and my daughter is now at the point where she likes to walk home. She goes in the pram on the way there just so we can get there quickly, but she likes to walk home, so I took some footage of her wearing it. I think it suits her so well, and when she lets me put the matching berry on as well, I just die because it's so cute. I don't have any plans to write this up as a pattern. I might do one day. I might knit her another one, give the Steek another go, adjust it slightly, I don't know, but if I do, I promise to let you know. So that's her little cardigan. And oh, one more. It's technically a finished object, but it's something I finished a long time ago. In episode 1, I was wearing my chunky Dahlia, and I mentioned that I'd made one for my daughter. So, and that reminded me of it. I'd completely forgotten that I'd made it for her. So I pulled it out of her cupboard, and it actually fits her quite well now. Again, I'll try and get some footage of her wearing it, but this is just to show you quickly. This is my daughter's Dahlia. I don't know if there's a jumper version of this pattern or not. But I couldn't find one at the time, but there is a version where you get a t-shirt and a dress all in one pattern. So I followed the t-shirt pattern, but then followed the sleeve pattern from the dress, because the dress has the long sleeves. I used Rico Essentials DK Merino, and I believe it was the shade Petrol, though I think that might be wrong. Didn't write that one down. I love this merino. It does grow, as I mentioned before, after you've knit with it, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing with children's clothing, because you could, I guess, knit a size down and then the garment will grow as the child grows, because they grow quick. But there you go, that's my little Penny's little Dahlia. She looks ever so cute in it, and it's still a little bit big, but she can just about get away with it now. So that is it for finished items, I think. Finished objects. I'm just going to take a little minute, just whilst the motorbikes go past. When it's a sunny day, we get lots of fancy cars and motorbikes and people who are driving about in the countryside, going past the house, which my son and my husband love. And there's also a little cafe down the road where people it's got like a big car park, and it's meant to be for cyclists, but people tend to gather around there as well. They meet up in their fancy cars and have a little look and a coffee. Massive tangent there. Moving on to whips. I've only got 2 this week. Well, I technically have 4, but you saw the other 2 in the last episode, and I've not worked on them anymore since, so I'm not going to bother showing them this week. But the 2 whips I have are quite good ones, and there's quite a lot to talk about within them. So I will start with the latest version of my Cedar Lane pattern. Last week I showed you a finished garment of a sweater that I've designed myself, and this week my yarn arrived for version number 2. And this is where we're at the moment. I've done the body, the raglan, and I'm working my way down a sleeve. I am using the, now don't come for me if I say this wrong, Berger de France. Berger de France. This one, Berger de France Alaska. And the first version was knit in Alaphos Sloppy, and I wanted to give it a go in something that wasn't a 100% wool, Icelandic, slightly definitely rustic yarn, because I know that doesn't appeal to everyone. And I've used this before. When I very first started knitting, my husband went to my local kind of independent crafty shop and just bought some wool and some needles and was like, there you go. And this was one of the yarns he bought for me. It's 50% acrylic, 50% wool, but it has none of that acrylic squeak to it. It's super soft. It is slightly shiny, but I don't really mind that. And it meets the correct gauge, the same as the Alaphos Sloppy. So if you did want to ever knit this pattern, if I do ever get around to releasing it, you've got 2 options there, and they both work. They're both the same gauge, which is what I wanted. I've got 3 colours. The top colour is, they've only got numbers, they don't have like colour names, but it is the N5110, and it's kind of like a really light baby pink. I wanted to do something a little bit more spring-like in colours, but not something too obvious. I still wanted a bit of like trend to it. And then the second contrast colour is N5040, and it's like a dusky pink, which I thought would be a nice transition kind of from light pink to a mid colour. And then my final colour is red. I'm trying to be more brave with my colour choices, and I really like pink and red together. I think it's unexpected, it's fun, it's like a pop of colour, and it kind of makes it a little bit more like you could wear it at any time of year, not just in the spring. And this is shade N4289. So this is what the colour palette will be like. I've got my original Cedar Lane here, so you can imagine the light pink, the mid pink and the dark pink. And I mentioned last episode, how when I first made this one, I ran out of this colour and had to use a different yarn that was a different colour, and I kind of thought, oh, maybe a colour pop inside the neck would be nice. It wasn't nice. I did try it. Originally this neck had the second contrast colour on the inside, and it just looked wrong. It looked like a mistake. Where I would knit the cast on stitches together with the body stitches to create the folded brim, there was like the pearl bumps of the original colour, and it didn't tickle my knitting pickle. I'm going to get so sick of saying that, aren't I? And like I was saying earlier, the inside of the garment is just as important to me as the outside. So I've decided not to go with a contrast colour on the inside of the neck and stick with a plain colour. If you did want to do that, it's really easily done, and I might mention that in the pattern. But I think for me and my design aesthetic, I'm going to keep it like this. Also, because there was a darker colour on the inside, you could kind of see it on the outside of the garment. So this looked slightly darker than this section, and again, that didn't sit well with me either. I have changed this slightly to the original one. I've changed the way that the sleeves and the body are, like the ratio between the sleeves and the body. And my plan is to do a bit more of this pale pink colour down the body, because on the original they're a bit uneven, but I've got more of this now, so that should work. Whilst I'm here as well, I've had a few questions about doing sleeves first rather than body first, because I mentioned that in my last episode, so I thought I'd go into that into a little bit more detail now. And this is an example of how I do it. So of course, when you do a top-down jumper, you split the sleeves and the body, and then usually you carry on knitting the body until it's finished. I tend not to do that with adult garments, and you can see here that I was knitting down the body, and when I come to the end of the ball of yarn that I'm working with, I put the stitches on hold. In this case, I just left them on the cable and put the little stoppers on the end, because I needed to use this needle size for the sleeves. But if I can't do that, if I need to use the cable as well as the needle, I'll just slip them onto some scrap yarn. But yes, I just put the body stitches on hold and then carry on with the sleeves as instructed in the pattern. So then, because obviously especially when you're doing the first half of the sleeve, you're doing a lot of this and you're kind of moving it around a lot, and doing that this is a bulky jumper, so if I was to have all that body, it makes this part of the sleeve like even more of a faff. Somebody's using my car as a mirror. It makes doing that bit even more of a faff, so that's why and how I do the sleeves first. And sometimes I'll do a little bit more of the body if I get a bit bored of the sleeves, but it's just however you feel about a garment. But in this case, that's how and why I do it. So I've been working on this for a couple of days, and I put it down to work on my second whip, just because it got quite warm and I didn't feel like working on a big chunky thing whilst it was warm. So that's my first whip, and my second whip is something like the Steek cardigan. It was completely unplanned, something I wanted to do for quite a while, but I don't know why I never tried it. But I did. I suddenly decided to give 2 at a time socks a go, and this is something that again I'd seen quite a lot and I always wanted to try, and I don't know why I didn't try it, because it's not it's not actually that tricky. And if you are, well, okay, so I say it's not that tricky. I have only ever known magic loop. I have worked with DPNs before, but I found it too fiddly. And also when you've got 2 children around, having 5 small little pointy sticks, one of which you usually lose, isn't the safest way to knit something small and round. So when I started knitting, I just learnt magic loop straight away. And I know a lot of people struggle with it and can't get their heads around it, but I don't know anything different. So to do 2 socks at a time, I found quite easy because I'm proficient with magic loop. If you've not done magic loop before, I wouldn't start doing 2 at a time. I'd do 1 sock on magic loop to get to know the process and how it works. But as you can see, I've made quite a lot of progress on these. There is no pattern for this. It's a 2.5mm needle and I've got 64 stitches. I'm a UK size 6. I'm about a 22cm circumference foot and I like my socks to be quite tight, and I find 2.5 with 64 stitches works for me. Absolutely no plan. I've got a whole bag that I mentioned last week of mini skeins of hand-dyed yarn, and I kept trying to find a pattern that would work for them or think of a way that would make them look really, really good. And they just ended up sitting in the corner not being used. So I thought, I'm just going to do it. I don't really care. I'm just going to pick up a colour that I like and start knitting. So I split all my 20g mini skeins into 10g balls each. So I had a ball for each sock and just started knitting. And I kind of tried to do a little fade type thing from one colour to the other, but obviously the colours are very, very different. So it was never going to be like a smooth gradual ombre fade. But again, I don't care. I cast these on to try the technique. The actual look of the finished sock isn't the important thing here. But already, I mean, I love them because I made them and they're so fun. They're just different crazy colours, completely random. Like, it's a sock. Like, reality check, it's a sock. It goes on our feet, it goes in our shoes. It's not something that needs to be this precious, perfect, amazing thing. If they look a bit funny or they go a bit wrong, it doesn't matter. It's a sock. So I'm really, really enjoying these, and I've been working on these pretty much non-stop over the past 2 days. And whilst I've been doing it, I've found the trickiest thing with 2 at a time socks is that the yarn management, and my way of dealing with that is to boop, put them inside. So I've gone down that part for now, but when you're working on one of the socks, you have your yarn out and you put the other yarn that you're not using on your other sock just inside the sock. And you couldn't probably do that if you had 200g balls or even 250g balls, but because I'm just using little 10g balls at a time, just pop them inside the sock, and it makes it so much easier to make sure you're using the right yarn and things don't get all messy and tied up. It's a bit trickier during the fades when I had 4 balls of yarn on the go, and I did get into a bit of a tangle, but it doesn't matter. The plan for these is afterthought heel, so I'm just going to knit a really long tube until I'll probably keep knitting these until I run out of this greeny colour, and then transition to one more final colour that will be for the toe, and then I can use that colour for the afterthought heel. I've got a little knitting date booked in with my real life friend, who obviously I've not seen for a very, very long time, my friend Anna, who has kind of, I didn't know anybody else in real life that knit other than Anna, so when I started we kind of became quite good little knitting buddies, and her husband is friends with my husband, and we have plans to meet up when we're allowed, when the house is finished, and I'm going to give her a little lesson in afterthought heels. So I'll probably finish these to the toe and then leave them ready for when I get to have my little afterthought knitting heel date with my friend. I can't imagine it right now. I just can't. I can't imagine actually meeting up with somebody in my house in real life, which is sad. But also, you know, it's the times we live in. What can we do? So that's my second whip. And that's it for projects. Gonna take another minute. Oh. I have got one yarn acquisition for you this week. If you're not into yarns that people buy, then thank you for watching to this point. I hope you enjoyed my projects, and I hope you'll join me another time. But if you do like seeing yarn that people have bought, then stick about for another few minutes. I will start with this guy. This isn't a yarn that I bought recently. It's something that's been in my stash for a long time. If you were with me last week, I was talking about the John Arbon Devonia 4-ply, and I had it and I used it for my ranunculus and for my a little pair of socks that I was working on that I have now finished, but you basically saw them last week, so I won't show them again. I had this in a teal colour, and it was a gift from my mother-in-law, and she also at the same time bought me 2 skeins in this colour, the purple. The colour is Nightshade, and again, it's not a colour I would choose. I'm not really a purple person, especially a darker purple, but I've wound up one ball, and just like the teal one, in real life it's just so beautiful. It's like it's made up of 2 colours that are mixed together to get the one colour. So there's kind of like a pinky purple, a brighter purple, a darker purple, and I just, even though it's not a colour I choose, I just appreciate the work that's gone into this yarn, and it deserves to be used, and I want to use it, and I want to make it into a garment that I will wear. So the plan for this is to make a what's it called, a love note by Tin Can Knits. It's a really popular pattern. It's a similar kind of loose fit, large gauge like the ranunculus, but it's got like a lace yoke. It's long sleeved, cropped, and when I saw it I was like, yeah, I definitely want to make that pattern. And the pattern calls for fingering held with mohair. So continuing with my love for hand-dyed mohair, I had a look on Etsy, just searched for purple hand-dyed mohair, and I found, oh, I'm like an old lady making noises when I bend over. I purchased 2 skeins of this stunning handmade mohair. It's from Dina's Home of Crafts, and the shade is Potpourri, which I thought was lovely, and it's 72% kid mohair and 28% silk. It's beautifully soft. It's stunningly dyed. I wanted something that was mainly purple with hints of pink and lighter shades in it to pair with the darker one, and I've wound up the first skein of it myself. I don't have a Swift or a winder, so it's quite a long process to do this by hand, but I'm hoping to get myself an actual setup when we have space for that kind of stuff, which we don't at the moment. This is what it looks like wound up in a ball, and you can see that actually the overall tone of it is quite a bit lighter than it looks when it's in a skein. So when I paired these 2 together, I did a little gauge swatch, which no longer exists because I ripped it back, but I did a gauge swatch, and the fabric that it created I didn't actually like that much. The beauty of the mohair was lost when it was against a dark background, and because it was quite a wide gauge, it's effectively a DK weight on 6mm needles for the love note, which is a very loose gauge. You just lost the stitch definition, and you couldn't see the true beauty of this mohair. So I ripped it all back, and then I paired it together with some leftover, I think it was some Filcolana Merci that I had, just to see what it looked like on a lighter base, and it looked much better. It looked a bit more like how this looks. It's like a white base, and you can see the different colours more, but it's still slightly clashed. It looked more like the white and the colours were kind of fighting each other. So I think the good pairing for this will be something that's kind of more of a pinky, kind of warmer tone, so that they kind of join together a bit better rather than fighting each other. So I am still planning to make a love note, but I want to try and find a solid purple mohair to pair with this, so that you don't lose the beauty of this yarn, and this yarn isn't sacrificed. And for this I'm going to find a lighter colour, and I don't know what I'm going to make with it. I've got ideas in my head for a top, like just an idea in my head, not a particular pattern, and I can kind of imagine how it would go. So maybe I'll do that with this, I'm not sure, but I am waiting to find the perfect yarn to pair with this. I'm at the point at the moment where my Wool Warehouse cart is full, my Lovecraft cart is full, Like my knit.co.uk cart is full of just all these different yarns that I want, and I just need to commit and buy them. But I'm struggling to commit at the moment because there's so much that I want and so much that I want to do. So yeah, that was my acquisitions for this week, and I think that brings me to the end. So probably going to do a little chit chat section now. So again, if it's not your cup of coffee, then thank you, see you next time. But if you would like to listen to some knitting chat, then that's what's happening now. I wanted to ask a question myself actually this week. I've been seeing a lot of shawls. Now, I've knitted a shawl before. I made one for my mum. It was in an Aran weight, and I didn't particularly enjoy the process. I found it a little bit laborious. The pattern itself was beautiful and I liked the finished object, but the thing with me in shawls is I don't really know when you would wear a shawl. My thinking is that if you're cold, then I would put on a jumper. I wouldn't necessarily wrap something around myself. And if I wanted a scarf, I'd probably wear a scarf rather than a shawl. But I'm also aware that when I do things for the first time and I don't necessarily like them, that doesn't mean it's not something I will like in the future. Socks, for example, the first time I knit socks, I was like, this is horrendous. Why are people so obsessed with this? Yet a couple of years later, I now really enjoy socks. So even though I didn't enjoy that first shawl experience, I don't want to write it off completely in case it's something that I really do enjoy. So if you've got the time, I'd really like it if in the comments below you would tell me when you wear shawls, like on what occasion. Do you wear them outside? Do you wear them inside? And also if you could share with me your favourite shawl patterns, maybe I can get a little bit inspired and find something that I would like to invest my knitting time into, because right now I much prefer to do sweaters and socks and stuff. But as we're going into the summer months, making sweaters it's less kind of appealing, and I have got some plans for some summer knits, like actual garments, but I think maybe now is the time to give a shawl a go. My coffee's definitely cold now. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. Of course, let me know what's been ticking your knitting pickle this week. I've had great fun chatting to people in the comments about the source of that phrase. Most people have heard the phrase tickle your fancy, and I guess it is quite similar, but for me tickle your fancy is more like something you see that you want, and tickle your pickle is something that brings you joy. There is a slight innuendo to it, which a few people have commented on, and I think maybe that's why it makes me laugh, because it is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But I'm glad that it's gone down well with you guys and it's made you laugh, and I've loved reading what has been tickling your knitting pickles. Honestly, it really does bring me joy, and I've also, through that, like, people have been sharing their patterns and little things that has been bringing them joy, and it's been so nice to see those things and be inspired by those things. So if there is something that has stood out to you that you really enjoy, please share it. I do my best to read every single comment and reply to as many as I can. So thank you if you do take the time to comment. I think that brings us to a close. Thank you for joining me. It's been a different experience this time. I've definitely been a little bit more nervous, and there'll probably be a few more cuts in the edit, so apologies for that. Hopefully I've not come across too fluffy. I don't know if that's the right word. 10 points to your house of choice if you made it this far. I know last week we were getting Gryffindor vibes, but technically I am a Ravenclaw. So let me know in the comments below what house you are, if you are in a house. If not, what are you doing with your life? But thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.